Welcome everyone to Drive the Conversation. And in today's episode, we have a beautiful panel where we will be talking about Chadwick Boseman and the power of his representation as Black Panther. And then in part two, we will be diving into Kenosha. So to kick us off, I'll introduce myself, my co-host, and then you all will get to meet our lovely guests. Hi, everyone. My name is Jewel Faguni, founder and CEO of You Matter Studios, and the lead producer for our premiere film, The Drive, which is available on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to pass the mic to my awesome co-hosts.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ira Zakino, and I use she, her, hers. And for You Matter Studios, I serve as the instructional design manager. My day job is I am a civic engagement project leader for an education non-for-profit in Chicago.
Welcome. All right, so we're going to kick off with intros. Please introduce your name, your pronouns, and what you do. And I'm going to pass it to David Wang.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is David Wang. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm currently a student of illustration graphic design at the Art Institute of Chicago. Nice to meet all of you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I will pass it on to Joan Mufuta.
Thanks, David. Hey, my name is Joan Mufuta. I'm a software engineer, and I'm really happy to meet all of you here for this discussion. I'm going to pass it to Mr. Vincent Weddington.
Thank you, Johan. My name is Vincent Weddington. I'm a 28-year veteran, major with the Dallas Police Department, and my pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm going to toss it to Aaron.
Thanks, Vincent. Hi, my name's Aaron Michael Blackman. I use the he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a technical writer at Microsoft. I'm going to pass it off to Jen now.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Rowe, and I'm the Executive Director for Educational Equity at School District 204, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Sephora Giwa.
Good morning. My name is Sephora Giwa. I am the principal of Persian Magnet School in Chicago. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and welcome. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. So let's kick off the conversation by just celebrating Chadwick Boseman. So my first question is, like, how did y'all feel when you found out, like, you know, we just lost our Black hero?
Yeah, no, it was a weird experience just because I know a little bit about how much he put into that character and into the film as a whole, and really shaping it to be the experience that I saw 3 times in the opening weekend. So to hear that level of input wasn't going to be there anymore, to know that that person wasn't going to be a part of that project, and just to know that we lost that great of a person was an experience. Yeah.
I think, Jewel, as a mom, you know, looking at young people, I can remember just when the film came out and the impact of that on, just thinking of it from the adult perspective of what my, you know, child was going to think about it, and seeing him go with his friends, a lot of whom are, you know, are white, and the excitement that they had of seeing just a superhero, and him being able to transcend that was amazing, and really one of the first time we've seen that kind of representation on the screen. And we could see how important Chadwick Boseman and that entire team took that process on their shoulders. So definitely a big loss.
Yeah, building on what Jen just said, as a principal, we actually had a school screening where we rented out the theater so all of our students can experience it. And it was just amazing, and the thrill of having us represented in this forum, and the empowerment that it gave the students, it was just unbelievable. That's going to last for years to come. I was completely shocked, and I thought my sisters were playing a joke on me when I first heard about it. And then when it started going through my Twitter feeds and I started seeing all the feed going through, I was just absolutely just surprised and shocked. We really lost a great actor and a great hero.
Yeah, I didn't know it was real either. Like, the way I found out, it was actually one of our like team meetings, And I saw my former professor post it and say, "Oh, I hate 2020." And I'm like, "There's no way." And then I saw it and I was, it was gutting. I didn't think it was real. Um,
I think for me, it's also pretty much the same feeling that I had, that everyone here had. At that point, I was emotionally tired of 2020, and then
yeah,
I was like, okay, uh, I really enjoyed like his work, and I think we will probably discuss a little bit more about what Black Panther represents, at least to the Black community, to I mean Hollywood in general, but also to African. But I think when he died, I was, you know, you're trying to look for someone to, I don't know, to be mad at. Am I gonna be mad at God? Am I gonna like, okay, because the dude was, I mean, Chadwick was doing such a great work for the Black community in general, and then boom, he just died. So my, I'm really sorry for what happened, and I keep praying for his family and also his friends.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm as a 57-year-old black man, which who's had two colonoscopies. What stunned me was the fact that he was so young and died from colon cancer. And if there's anything that can be gleaned that's a positive, perhaps it'll bring some sort of awareness to the fact that this is a killer of especially black men, and we need to go to the doctor and get our colonoscopies done about every 5 years, and hopefully that'll shine some light on this medical emergency within our community.
yeah.
Um, um, we're ready to move on to our next question. Our next question, last week during our episode, David and Jula kind of talked about what Wakanda represented. So the question is, what does Wakanda mean for you? Or what do you think Wakanda represents as a greater whole?
That is such a great question. And for me, it's kind of like twofold. Like one part is that sense of like Black excellence, and how we can, even that sense of kind of being untouched. I mean, I don't think we look at the impact of, colonialism and how it kind of stripped away, a community. And I think the film, digs into that of like looking at the seed of our creation as Black culture, right? And then the new world and that impact of slavery. So we kind of see those two stories kind of juxtaposed, right, throughout the movie. And so like looking at Wakanda, I was just speaking with some folks over at Fermilab. I'm really interested in science and want to look at doing like a whole STEM program based on Wakanda, right? What was going on there of how you can be smart and creative and, involved in science and things like that. So for me, that's kind of what Wakanda was looking at, the sense of being untouched and left in this sense of excellence.
First of all, I'd like to really thank David and Jules for last week's discussion. I did learn a lot, but I think for me, as someone who's coming from the Congo, I mean, I do not speak on behalf of the entire continent, so I'm just gonna give my opinion as someone who grew up in the Congo. I did enjoy the cultural representation of Black Panther, and I know at some point people were saying, "Oh, this is probably what Africa would have looked like if colonization and slavery didn't happen." I think there is probably a lot of truth into that. But for me as an African, it's more of a kind of a wake-up call for my leaders. Like, okay, might be something that will be our future. And we have to work hard to reach that point. And that's why I'm kind of, and I'm kind of a little bit, I'm a little bit disappointed by that's because that's a message that many African leaders and many people from Africa didn't get from the movie. So it represents a Black excellence, but we have to aspire to it. And I really hope that with the death of Chadwick Boseman, maybe people will go back and watch again that movie and now understand that message. I think that that message was lost by everyone, but we should aspire to it. We should work hard so that African countries become independent, and we also participate to this technology called like advancement of the world.
Johan, I completely agree with you as an African, also from Ghana, Accra, Ghana. Um, I actually saw what you saw as well about the potential for our future, and that we are not bounded by the actions of the past, and we really need to start thinking forward. And also, I agree with Jen about talking about Black excellence in science. One of my statement that I've always say to children when they tell me they don't like math and science, I'm always shocked because I'm like, Africa is where math and science came from. How could you not, being a Black descendant, be in love with this way of learning? And so I hoped when I took my students to see Black Panther, that they would get that sense of inspiration and to strive for the excellence that was portrayed in the movie, but to also understand that the potential is still there. We can still shape our future, and the future is definitely within our control to take it in the direction that we want to take it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a bit of a comic book nerd, so I'll just speak on cinematic Wakanda specifically. And so just what it really meant to me and what the movie meant to me is just having unfettered Blackness in mainstream media and just having it be super successful. That was probably like my biggest and just like favorite takeaway from that version of Wakanda, and just watching us be our authentic selves on screen, and then going to events where the theater was just packed with Black people and they were all just vibing incredibly with this movie in a way that I'd never gotten to experience before, and was amazing. So, you know, when I think Wakanda forever, I like in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking Black stories forever.
Exactly. And I'll hop up of what Aaron Michael was saying. It was very like celebratory just to see a bunch of people that look like you on screen. And fun fact, I went with Johan to the movie, and I remember I was wearing my traditional clothes as like someone who's first gen Nigerian, and it was cool to see like the implementations of all the different African cultures as well. But I do want to call out like the great point that David brought up in our last discussion is that, you know, it highlights that what Africa could have been without colonization, but it's also like what Africa is. Like there's such a misrepresentation of African countries. And so I'm really hoping it was something that encouraged people to like really relook and not just lump Africa in one, like, you know, it's a whole continent, right? And there's so many countries that are beautiful. I'm gonna shout out Nigeria because it's the best. But it was just really beautiful just to have Black Panther just be on screen for everyone and just have the impact it did. So yeah.
So I remember going to see The Wiz when I was younger, and that was kind of that first experience for me to like go in to see like a cast that way. And again, not like showing Black pain, but like, you know, just, you know, Black people telling creative, fun stories. But when I went to see Black Panther, it was interesting to me because it was more of a white audience, and I was excited to see that again. Like I went with my son and his friends, and it was great to see those white kids want to be Black Panther and not seeing that he was just another one of the superheroes that they admired and thought was really cool. So I loved that part. It was pretty powerful for me as a mom, because I was waiting. I kept waiting to see if things would come up, but it didn't. So I was thrilled.
Yeah, I do want to add to that point. I loved when Halloween rolled around the following year and you just saw kids of every color in Black Panther costumes. It was just a thing to do, and that was awesome.
I came into understanding Wakanda as a sort of a visitor because I'm Chinese American. So I came into it, I understood it in a little bit a different way, because after that I started reading about African empires and civilizations that were not just Egypt and Carthage, which is the only thing I think Western textbook will ever cover. And so, you know, there's Kush and Nubia on the south of Egypt that people ignore, but they actually have a long-standing history of conflict and cooperation with Egypt. You have West Africa, Mali, Ashanti, and all those other places that were just pretty much completely ignored in our textbook. And I think the subtlety of understanding is like, it's not just Wakanda being a sort of hypothetical place where colonization never touched, but also a historical reality. And as a Chinese American, China right now has a lot of its issues right now, and it's between Hong Kong, the Uyghur Muslim treatment, and all that stuff. But as a culture, the Chinese people are very resilient because there is like a very direct cultural pride in understanding. Like we have our very clear portrayal of Chinese history on our own terms. Means that, well, we knew we were great in the Han Dynasty. We knew we invented the compass. We knew we had watertight compartments before the Europeans did. And just the mere knowledge of that gives us sort of a psychological resilience against oppression, which is why the British couldn't last that long and the Japanese couldn't last that long during World War II. And I think that being able to reframe that in the United States and in Africa for the Black communities worldwide could be a very empowering thing, in terms of saying, oh well, it's not that our ancestors hypothetically did great things, it's that they did great things and they're still doing great things.
Yeah, and I think the film was kind of trying to approach that because we see, again, that sense of having to hide yourself, right, in plain sight, the sense of, this destructiveness, how do you preserve, your culture, your creativity, your identity, your people. And I love that, sense of that force field, and how we wish we could have that force field and to, again, be able to be keepers of your own history and knowledge. And we can see that on both continents that we're struggling with that. And right now, I feel like we're having that reckoning, right, of who's telling our stories and reclaiming that history, and everybody having to unlearn, study, and like relearn about our perceptions, right, of that shared history we have. So it's quite an interesting time right now.
When I watched Black Panther, I was sitting in the theater and I was thinking to myself, I wish all the heads of state of all the African nations could watch this movie together, because collectively, the continent of Africa has more riches and resources in the rest of the world. Instead of fighting with each other, they could realize their power if they could put their heads together and watch that movie. I thought it was an excellent opportunity for all the nations of Africa to come together and really put their imprint on the world, if you will, using that movie as a backdrop or inspiration. And I'm hoping that in some kind of way that movie will lead to something just like that.
If I can add something, I think maybe David and Michael did talk about it, but I think one of the greatest thing about this movie, it's showed that in general, the black market is valuable. I mean, Hollywood can make a lot of money out of it, but also, I don't know who is a gamer here. I mean, maybe everyone has played that game, but God of War, So when I watched the movie, I was like, okay, we must have a kind of an African version of God of Wars. I think even David talked about it. The African cultures, I mean, former empires and kingdom, it's not just Egypt, right? We have in the central part of Africa, like the Luba Empire, the Congo kingdom, all the stuff. So there is like this huge reserve of, I don't know, methodology, like stories that from which we can build video games, which will have a great success in the West. So it's just this, I don't know, I think that we should take it from Black Panther, like another way to bring economic values to like African cultures, I would say. But I also want to say, I agree with what Jules said and everyone, but I also think what the movie probably fell short of is, I don't know, this I'm not gonna, I when I watch the movie, I really enjoy the culture, but I didn't quite recognize the current African like experience, I'd say, right? Like the struggle between countries. Well, maybe there was, I think there was this scene where there were some tribes trying to overcome, like, you know what I mean? So I understood that, but I think maybe they should have point more light into it because that's the reality of African countries. Because through that, many African could say, okay, all the stupid fights among us are useless, right? So we should probably work harder together in order to move forward. I wish the movie would have like pinpoint that with more strength. But other than that, it was really one of the greatest movies I've watched in a long time.
And thank you for that, Yohan. Just building on what you said, I think it goes back to what Jennifer was saying about who's telling our story. And the person in charge of telling our story, like Jewel, is the one that is going to be the one to be heard the loudest. So it's going back empowering Africans, our different tribes, our different culture, our different customs, to showcase and understand that it's not just for us when we get together as a culture to showcase our, you know, our all the talent and achievement that we have, but that the world, the broader world, also need to see this talent so we can tell our story, our real story of where we're from, what our tribe is like, what we live like, and not just this colonized version of what Africa looks like. Yeah.
And if we even talk about like just the power of representation in general, we think about all the roles that Chadwick did, right? Thurgood Marshall, James Brown, like he did all our, he did his roles justice. He did us justice with representation. And I think that is why it's important to have that representation behind the screen too, to really accurately try to tell those stories. And I mean, it's kind of like why we have these panels too, so we can really continue to amplify our voices and have these kind of conversations.
I think what you just shared was really important. And I think, again, that's what was really significant about the film in terms of, you know, you have a woman who's doing the costume design and, you know, her winning for that and all these pieces that like for the first time. So even when you kind of look back to like other films that, you know, like I was really influenced by Color Purple, but, you know, the director was, you know, like Steven Spielberg, the people who were doing all those other creative elements, the talent in front were Black faces, but the ones who were putting that story together were not. And it's great to see that kind of leap. And again, even in this kind of particular genre, right? Because sometimes I think we appreciate like Chadwick Boseman in creating those historical figures, but being able to have this bigger, again, superhero mainstream story being told through that lens was very powerful. I've been really influenced by the book, The Children of Blood and Bone, and you know that story, and again that sense of mythology being created and using it based on African mythology, because so much of what we live by is kind of based on European Western mythology and all the stories that we tell. And it's really been powerful to see that from a different perspective in that series right now. And and again, it being read and popularized beyond Black people.
I'm curious for like, oh, sorry, keep going. No, it's you. Go ahead.
I remember seeing a video on YouTube where Ryan Coogler and his crew went to South Africa for several months just to see what it is like in person there and get some information. And he was talking about the parallels between some of their habits and customs with what Black Americans often do. So, for example, and there was it's the differences in how these are framed that says a lot. For example, he talks about how in some of the tribes there, whenever they have visitors over, they'll have all the young men and all the young people out there in the front just hanging out. And for them, it's both like as a welcome, but also a sort of like a display of how strong your family is. And here, that'd be considered loitering. And it will often be a case of, in many places, a case of suspicion for people walking past. And so it's the same idea in terms of what they're doing, but it's the way the outside world portrays that particular thing is changes. He also talks about eating watermelon in Africa. And he talks about how, sometimes he's here in the United States, he's uncomfortable eating watermelon because of the stereotypes that have been associated with it. Where the Africans are just like shocked that why would you ever be so ashamed to eat something that is so nutritious and nourishing? And it's water, it's sweet, it's full of life. And that led me to another whole, started reading about, why is watermelon stereotypically frowned upon here? And it goes back to Reconstruction and the economics of, newly freed slaves having to, using watermelon as a means of, economic income. And then white Americans demonizing it as a response in order to, depress their market. And so I think that part in that interview that struck me is that, yes, I think the cultural ideas did in fact get passed down, and those traditions and habits were in fact passed down, modified over time, influenced by others, but they still exist. And maybe part of it is also rediscovering that connection that was always there, just like uncovering it once again.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like that's what the power of representation is. It does have the power to stereotype and really shape your perceptions. And I guess my questions for like the people in education is how can we take the lessons from what we've learned from the power of positive representation and kind of funnel it into our schools, so then all our kids are like saying, okay, hey, like we are, all our lives like have value and we're all like excellent people, and like just celebrating our differences. Like I'm curious like how to translate that into education.
Well, as a principal, my goal is to inspire and to ensure that students see themselves in the place in the world, and to understand that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. You have to just
I'm
repeat.
sorry. I was saying, as a principal, I wanted to make sure, after seeing not only Black Panther, but Selma and all these other really uplifting movies that represents us in a more positive light, I wanted the students to understand that they do have things that they can aspire to. And regardless of how they're viewed by the broader society, they are still in control and they're still in charge of what they can achieve. And so this is just a step. And again, this summer we had Black is King from Beyonce, which again celebrated African culture and celebrated being African. And we're just proud of it, and just making sure that they see themselves in history, they see themselves in the literature, they understand that we had impact, just like David said about the Chinese culture being very firm and letting them know where they're rooted from. That's what we have to do as well, and that's what I'm inspiring to give to my students.
Yeah, and I think we shared that Dr. Giwan are, not just colleagues, but are like family friends, and this is kind of what we talk about all the time. And the thing that I've most admired about her work is that she's in a K-8 building, and she is working with predominantly Black students. And I think, so a lot of times our conversation is, what is that experience like, in contrast to what I deal with in a very more diverse learning environment. And that comes with a lot of challenges, meaning that you're kind of battling people's appreciation and wanting to do that, to talk about that and focus in on that, and they're also their knowledge around it. So for example, when I taught at an all boys school, my approach was very targeted towards the things that they needed and the things that I could say and pull up. When I went to a school that had boys and girls in it, things began to change for me, and how I had to deal with the needs of girls and also with male students. And then that spectrum in between, as I learned more about that. So I think we have to do a lot of work as educators, and sometimes being okay to target, just like Jewel, you being a person with STEM and science, of like having gems and looking at girls. We are not okay with kind of looking at what are the needs of for example, again, just Black children and how we teach them and what they may need, and being okay with delivering that, in particular in a more racially mixed environment. So to me, that's definitely been a struggle of how to navigate that. So we have a lot of work to do.
So to add to that point, especially the STEM part, I just want to see a picture of Shuri in every classroom, every textbook, every science lab. I just want to see a picture of Shuri. You can throw Chadwick in there too, because, you know, he was also in the lab, and I think he made the first Black Panther suit, the one where you have to put the helmet on, and then, you know, she clowned him for that. But I just want to see a picture of Shuri anywhere STEM is happening. Like, that's how I want to see that representation get passed on into other and greater things, so that, you know, little Black children can see themselves in science labs and in STEM fields, and go into college and all that other stuff. That's what I want to see, like, first and foremost.
If I could piggyback on that, I want to see the same thing, and I want the 4 women from Hidden Figures, their pictures and their stories told to young Black girls in public schools in Dallas, especially, so they know that being able to achieve mathematical success is possible. And I think those types of images need to be ingrained in our youth from the time they enter into the school system. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just as a Black woman in tech, like, just thinking about Shuri and just seeing her messing with all her gadgets, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like my AI class. And it would be great if that was like what it was translated to, or what it is, honestly, for children today, is they get to associate those people with just history and really shaping tech. And so I can't agree more.
Well, let's not forget about I'm sorry, I wanted to add, let's not forget about the mom, you know, Black Panther's mom, and the importance of Black leadership and the role of women representing in Black leadership positions, including the boardroom and the C-suite. Okay, so I just wanted to add that part too.
I'm glad you did.
So like, to complement what like everyone's saying, but especially what Jen and Dr. Giwa was saying, like so when I had experience of like being like in the classroom last year, like I taught in a school that was not different from the demographic of Pershing, and like one way that we can like put like Black Panther into the classrooms is to like really targeting especially if you have the privilege of like teaching like predominantly like Black and brown students, like when they see like themselves in the lessons that you design for them, like there's something that really clicks and it becomes a really magical experience. So like this is a palette that I like showed my students when I was talking about like Egyptian innovations, and it became like a really magical experience because the names of the shades, this is a palette by a company called Juvia's Place, because I noticed that the girls were really into makeup, and in Egypt that was where makeup was invented, and so the names of the shades were named after African goddesses and Egyptian goddesses. And it became a really powerful experience because like not only were they immersed in the actual lesson, which is Egyptian innovations, but also they left the classroom with critical lenses, like asking questions such as like, if Egypt is where makeup was started, then why is the makeup industry predominantly serving white women right now? So yeah.
One of the things I noticed in Champaign when I was there is that off the top of my head, I know there are 5 beauty supply stores off the top of my head. And like 3 of them I know are not owned by Black folks, anyone in the local Black community. And in fact, the other 2 were owned by Asians. I understand why, you know, we in the East Asian American community will sell beauty supply products catering to Black communities, and the answer is we will sell anything as long as it makes money. Like, we don't discriminate. But at the same time, it's like, what depth of understanding could we really have into the hair care needs of the Black community, where the hairstyle is both diverse in texture and needs, and and the tools necessary to help maintain them. Like, what do we know about it? So one of the things that stood out to me is like, why shouldn't a beauty supply store catering largely to the needs of the Black communities be just predominantly 90+% Black owned? And that was one of those small moments where, upon reflection, I think that, you know, what I would like as a Chinese American interacting with the Black community in terms of business, in terms of trade, is I would like to see my ideal world, for example, will be a Chinese industry and a Black-owned industry in a mutual kind of trade relationship, in a mutual exchange relationships. What we have in the United States right now is more of a customer and seller relationship, where it's more of one-sided, where it's like we're selling, the Black communities are buying, but like at the same time, what are the Asian communities, you know, purchasing off on the other end? And so, in a way, Black Panther is establishing not just a Black-led political system, but a Black-led economic system as well. And so, a Wakanda, in metaphorical terms, would be a Black industry that stands independent on its own right, but that is also engaging in trade with an exchange with the rest of the world in a state of equity, where we all benefited and, you know, made stronger by that equitable transaction. And so, yeah, I would like to see, you know, a Chinatown having a mutually beneficial trade relationship, not just like selling and buying, but like a mutually beneficial exchange with Black industries. In some places, I believe it's happened. I think Atlanta has a hotspot for that off the top of my head. I'm sure there are other places that are around, and we don't get enough exposure to them, I think.
I think there's so much we can talk about in terms of just economics. And again, for me, going back to that of like, what, you know, how does that system work, and how has, you know, again, Wakanda had to hide, and, you know, they had technology, they had resources, and they had to have that, you know, debate with themselves of how they were going to help other people, because so much would be sacrificed with that. And we can see so much of that today, and what are the roadblocks, and what communities, whatever your demographics are, you know, of how you've been able to get into that business. You know, we could look at like the Jewish community and our stereotypes, you know, what kind of business we see them in, but we know that that goes to what things they were allowed to do. And at this time right now, it's exciting of how we're knocking down doors and saying we have to have representation, because we all lose economically if we don't have people engaged in that. We were talking about cosmetics, and I know I sent Jewel and I think Dr. Giwa also, information about a woman who has created her own cosmetics line, and again, how she's knocking down barriers for that, because you're not making money if you're not serving these other folks and allowing them to be creators in those industries as well, because you're missing something. So again, we're at such a pivotal time right now, and it'll be interesting to see how we're able to connect as different communities, not kind of pivoting to whites as like the norm, right? Like you're saying, David, of other communities connecting right now to create something new and more powerful. So it's an exciting time.
And I think that's the beauty, is just like the power of just really working together. And you see it like when you like even look outside at the protests, right? It's not just like a black and white conversation. It's everyone is a part of this conversation, and really just is supporting each other in business, supporting each other, fighting for our rights. So I think that's like a really good point to bring up. All right, my next question is, what can we do as an audience and society to ensure that Black representation, or just honestly more representation, expands beyond media and beyond the screen?
I'll go. I think the conversation has started with this reckoning in 2020, and we have opportunity. The doors are opening, and I think we need to step in and firmly claim our places and encourage our children to also. It's going to be hard, and it's not going to be easy, because we're really fighting a lot of systemic issues that have been brought upon us from generation to generation, but the doors are opening, and as more companies are going beyond making statements and are putting money to their words, we need to be in a space to take advantage of that. And I think where that will start is seeking out the partnership and forcing them to actually come through on their words. Yes.
I think looking at, even like for our panel, that normalizing having different voices, and then, that's the expectation, and creating space to be able to know that we have to ask for those things, I think is really important now, so all of us have to, and I always think that this work is like ongoing, and you don't get a break, that we have to recognize that this is like a lifestyle, right? So the more people understand and help to carry this desire for equity, diversity, inclusion, that they see that through that lens and are willing to carry some of the weight, that's how we're going to really grow and make some strides.
Can I like tweak this question a little bit, because like obviously like we've been talking heavily on like education, and it's great, but I want to know like specifically like for Aaron, Michael, and for Johan, like what do these action steps look like in tech? Like for Major Weddington, like what does this look like in the police world? And for like for David, like what does this look like? What do these action steps look like in the art world?
Very great question. I'm so happy about this question, actually. I think as someone in tech, I'd like to see more, well, how can I say it? I think the key would be to expand the reserve of recruitment, I would say. I know some companies now are trying to recruit in African countries. For example, I know Nigeria and Ghana. Those are the two major tech hubs, like where companies such as, I don't know, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, all other companies are trying to recruit people from those areas. And I think that's a major step, a major positive step, because I don't think that was the case in the past. But I would probably say, I don't know, if I have to add, Nigeria and Ghana, it's not the bulk of Africa, because Africa pretty much, if you have to divide into, you probably say the French speaking like African countries and also the English part. So it's just a big mixture that they have to, it doesn't limit to Nigeria and Ghana. So they could probably go in Central Africa, Cameroon, the Congo, South Africa. So I would invite companies to expand where they're recruiting those African talents, because as an African in tech, I don't see a lot of people like me, I would say, right? So it's mainly people from other ethnicities, but I think it's going to be, all those companies are missing out a lot by not expanding those areas. So.
Yeah, one of the things I want to see is just kind of the breaking down of the ways that we're segregated that don't really show up and aren't obvious. So one of the things that I keep running into is that people who are not like us just can't see what we see. They can't see the talent that we see. They can't see the events that we see. They can't see the places where we show out and show up and do our best work. And I think one of the things I want to see is us promoting those things ourselves, us putting those events, those people, those talents right in front of their faces so that they can see them, because oftentimes they just don't have the eye or the visibility to see that. And that's definitely something I want to see change. And whether that's just like bringing someone's resume and just showing it directly to a hiring manager, or it's making sure that they're getting out to the right events where we show up, whether it's like saying, hey, I want to go to a NSBE conference, but, maybe hiring managers should also go to more NSBE conferences, even if they're not hiring at the time. Like, if you have the ability to recruit people, just go. Take a year and go to the BAM conferences that happen on campus at Microsoft. Blacks at Microsoft, that's what BAM is. Go to the events and see us where we show up. So that again.
Spell out. Oh yeah, so tell everybody what NSBE means, because I don't know if everybody knows what NSBE is.
National Society of Black Engineers. So NSBE conference that's the National Society of Black Engineers. So, you know, they have conferences where a lot of recruiting happens, a lot of networking happens. And I think, you know, we need to encourage more people to attend those events, even if they don't think those events are put on for them. They need to show up, they need to go, they need to get that experience. So they have it in their heads, like how and where to recruit the talent that they keep saying that they're looking for. So I think part of it I want to see is to have other people show up those events and just really, really put our best selves right in front of them so that they can see it. And so it's actually in their mind a tangible example of who they want to recruit, where they want to go, and all those sorts of things.
And I'll add something to like the tech piece too, is just normalizing seeing us in the C-suite, and just having a seat at the table in leadership, because I think that's something that attributes to why tech isn't always accessible, especially in some of our communities, because we do not have the people who can relate to, I'm going to put on my tech at the consumer experiences that look like us, you know? So I think that's another way to kind of make representation real in tech, is by also like giving us a seat at the table and having us as leaders. So yeah.
So in the art world, I just an assignment this past 3 days ago, I watched a video with designer Ini Archibong, who is California born and is currently working in Switzerland. And I have two quotes from him that I think was instructional for me. And what his first quote, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. His first quote essentially boils down to this, that Archibong succeeded in some ways because he was speaking to a particular audience. In this particular, the Eurocentric design, the white audience, and he was able to succeed in doing that. But he also says that it is unfair that we should expect everyone to do that in order to succeed. That it is unfair to expect Black designers to have to go through that. And his second one that I think was even more resonance is that he talks about colonizers coming to Africa and then taking their artifacts. And he says it is important to understand that foreign gays coming into Africa, wherever they went, to walk into a culture and not understand anything about the culture and seize objects of that culture and label them what they thought they should be labeled, began a system of how we are viewed in terms of our value to society at large with our creative powers. And for me, but the lens that I see it through is that, if I was, for example, as a Chinese American artist, to take African tropes, let's say I'll take some Mali artifact and use it in my work, then by definition, like, it's unavoidable that my work will in some ways influence how that artifact will be seen by people in the future. And so if I was to incorporate such a thing into one of my work, then I have to be very responsible about how I do it. And I think that the big takeaway for me is that in representation in art, we have to demand that whoever we're asking to be represented has to be able to do it in their own terms. So an example of this not being done well is, for example, if you guys heard about the film Cuties that came out in Netflix recently.
Yeah.
Now, Cuties deals with a very tough subject matter. It deals with the hypersexualization of young girls. But the way Netflix, the streaming service, cut the trailer and wrote the description created an impression that this was a glorification of the sexualization of young girls, that this was a shallow drama based around it. What the film actually was is sort of a examination into the psychological impact and damage that such a culture has on young girls. And so in a single stroke, the way Netflix framed this particular film destroyed the career of a Black Senegalese immigrant and a brilliant artist in her own right. And so are there criticisms that we can make about this film? Maybe there is. Could we ask that maybe the hypersexualization criticism, could it be made without an actual portrayal or depiction, or the usage of a Black girl as an actor? Maybe. I mean, that's a debate that we can have, but that's not the debate that is actually being had, because Netflix has turned it into something that it patently isn't. And so because this director was not allowed or was unable to present her artistic vision on her own terms, and because Netflix did it for her, it might have irreparably damaged her career, at least in the very short term. And it's unknown that what opportunities are still going to be available for her going forward. And so for people who do think about watching this film, first of all, don't go on Netflix to do it, because Netflix should not be rewarded for their misrepresentation of a film. And I could say, yes, this film is uncomfortable to watch. That by nature, it's a tough subject, and it deals with it pretty head on. But here we have a Black artist, who was unable to have a work shown for what it is, and instead now we're debating about it in terms of what we think it is, and that is very unfair. So in the Black art community, if we as curators or institutions, it's not just about, oh, we're going to get a Black artist into this exhibit. It's about, are we going to give this Black artist the ability to depict their art and present it on their terms in their own decision making? And we're very far behind on that at this moment. Very far behind.
All right, well, we'll end up with our next question. Okay, honestly, am I glitching? Is everyone seeing me glitch? No?
No.
It's not
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Right? It's like, oh no. Okay, well, you know what? We'll end off with their last question, as long as you all can hear me. And so our last question is what are the action steps we can take for Chadwick Boseman's legacy?
So for me, it's just the biggest action steps are really just pushing authentic stories. Like that's really like what my big takeaway from Chadwick Boseman is wherever you are, whatever you're doing, try to do it as authentically as possible. So if whether that's representing yourself or you've been tasked with representing a culture that you're not a part of, either learn as much as you can or find someone from that culture or from that background and just ask them like or put yourself in their shoes. If you have the money, go and travel and go to the place that you're supposed to be representing. If you don't, you'll figure something out, basically. So it's really pushing the representation of authentic experiences the best you can and giving people the opportunity to put their authentic experiences up front.
We'll take like one or two more answers. So and then we'll close out our part one of the conversation.
Real quick, I would just say, see the beauty and talent in Black men and not see them as something to be afraid of. So, because he totally showed how amazing Black men are.
Yeah.
I am inspired to look for African films now. How many English subtitles? I think a lot of them are, made in French or other native languages. But if I'm talking about Black representation on their own terms, what we have so far is Black Panther itself is researched and effort was put into it to understand it, to understand the inspirations it's drawing from. But at the same time, it is an American studio with American-based cast. Not all of them are Americans. Not all the cast are Americans. But it's a based American studio making an interpretation of a African technological nation. So now I'm curious. What does an Angolan film look like? What does a Beninese film look like? And I'm curious to see some.
And for me, I'm just looking forward to the African version of God of War. Like all this methodology, it's just gonna be great, a great success. I'm just looking forward to it.
All right, well, I will wrap us here. I'll add my last tip point is for me, one of the biggest lessons I've gotten from just Chadwick Boseman and learning more about him is just really maximizing your time here. You know, life is short. So like, how are you maximizing your impact and just leaving this world a better place than, you know, how you got here. So thank you all for this really rich conversation on celebrating Chadwick Boseman and just the power of his representation. And you can check out our next episode where we will be discussing part 2, where we're diving deeper into Kenosha. Until then, thank you everyone on this panel for being here. Shout out to my amazing co-host, Ira, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.